All right, welcome back to the Intelligent Human Leadership Podcast. I am your host, David Carr. Here, of course, if you're listening to this for the first time for some reason, welcome. I'm grateful you're here. We have recorded over 70 episodes. Hard to believe. I started this podcast in January of 2024. So if you've missed an episode or two, I encourage you to go back, listen to the journey here. In fact, this particular series, we have four episodes now, and this is going to be our fifth on about leadership that works. It's a series to help diagnose and resolve some of the most common leadership breakdowns out there. In a way, I call it a leadership audit, looking at different aspects of the business. And we covered communication in our first episode. We actually had an introductory episode, very short one there, but we jumped into communication. We have covered relationships. We've covered alignment, and today we're going to get into execution. And to illustrate that point, I actually started recording this episode and had a technical malfunction, and I had to back up, adjust. And why do we challenge? We have challenges with execution. Great plans ultimately don't always succeed. They fail, and we're going to find ways to fix it. How are we going to shore that up? And so I want to encourage you on this episode that if you again miss any, go back. These are all going to build on each other. You're going to get a lot more out of the whole series. But nonetheless, you're here, you're catching this, you're hearing the words of my voice, or perhaps watching me on YouTube. I, of course, appreciate you all subscribing, leaving comments, being a part of this journey. It's not just the Intelligent Human Leadership Podcast, which I started in January 2024. We're over 70 episodes in. It is greater part of the Steward Your Business ecosystem, if you will. And my passion as a business owner, as a leader, having been in the environmental consulting world for 25 years, working with individuals and teams, it really is to help you as an individual become smarter, more engaged, and bring that back into your organization, whether it's a for-profit, nonprofit, whatever that might be. Where are you showing up? This can be applied to your family. This can be applied into many aspects of your life. And, there's a lot of activity out there, and I want to break this down. Execution isn't necessarily activity. It isn't being busy. It is really about traction. It's about making movement forward, and we don't always get there, quite honestly. Uh, in fact, we slide backwards, we go sideways. This is part of our journey. There is a drift. How do we get back so that we're moving forward and getting traction? For those of you that have uh, been in the field like I have as a biologist, I spent many, many years as a biologist. I can remember driving on this road. We had this big project here in Southern California, and I remember driving this one road, and it was a lot of clay on it, and the vehicle was going up this road, and it couldn't get the traction. There was just too much gunk on the wheels. It started to slide. In fact, we were kind of at the edge. It was like a little scary, but we made it okay. But you could spend a lot of energy revving the engine and trying to turn the wheels, and it wasn't going to make a difference. And we actually had to go slow, and we had to like move some of that dirt away. We had to get in a place where it wasn't just about effort. And sometimes we think effort, doing a lot of things, is productive, or and it's not. It's not productive. Unfortunately, it's a lie. We don't live in that reality. We are, the you know deluding ourselves. Let's get real. Let's understand that there are common signs of failure, that we all can recognize. I'll highlight a few of them where the execution breaks down. Did you miss a deadline? Was there a misunderstanding? Did you not understand what was required or the time that was involved? Perhaps scattered priorities. We've talked about the Eisenhower box, if you're familiar with that. The urgent and important, the urgent, the important, the not urgent, not the important. Are we blaming others, or are we a victim? Are we a victim of the circumstances? Or we're looking and we're pointing at this other person or this organization or this entity. These are very common signs of a breakdown in execution. Where things don't always go to plan. And I think all of us can take a moment and we can think about this, whether it's in our business or in our home life, quite honestly. What didn't go to plan? In fact, oftentimes, you know, things in our life don't always go to plan. uh, for those of you that, like me, grew up in the 80s, there was a great TV show called The A Team. And there was this gentleman that Hannibal that would say, that, always have his cigar. And he's like, I love it when a plan comes together. Well, it is great when it comes together. But most of the time, it doesn't come together. And so, what do you do when it doesn't come together? I'll throw another 80s TV reference to you. There was another great TV series called Quantum Leap. This man was trying to get back into his current time, and he was traveling through time. He kept coming up and showing up in places where he wasn't anticipated. He didn't know what was going to happen there. This is life. There are things where there are going to break down. It's not if, it will be, but what can we do to minimize that execution breakdown? Because if we can minimize that and not to have so many, we can make greater progress. We can make greater traction. There's a great book called Traction. Many of you may have heard that book, or have heard of the system EOS. That's another one where I work with those implementers. It's so important to have folks that are helping you in strategy, and I do that too. But I work with others in this space collaboratively to make sure that we're helping you execute in all areas. Now, there's a lot involved in a business. There's a lot involved in an organization, whether you're the business owner or the leader. There is marketing, there's business development, there's, you're looking at your products or your services, you're looking at financials. You're For me, and why I started Steward Your Business, is I'm looking at the people. How are those people? How are you taking care of those people? Paired with all the other elements of what it is to run a business. These are very important. Each of them are important, and they all are related because you can have a breakdown in one and it'll affect the other. You know, for example, if you're having, even when we're using technology, uh, we talk about that here on the podcast. AI obviously is one that's very involved now. We're seeing a lot of that. But if it's not work run well, it's not going to help you execute and get the job done effectively. We need to be looking at what we're using and how it's affecting our team. I work with a client and their payroll was off. Well, how does that affect our teams? Well, there's a breakdown in that, and how they're getting paid, what's the communication with them. So these are all different areas that we can have a breakdown in execution, getting the job done. Now, think about this. I'm bringing in the business aspect, but I'm not. So it's very tangible to seeing budgets going over, project slippage, where we're going over budget. We didn't plan for this. We had to do things over, redo work. Team turnover is a big one. People are just burnt out. They don't understand what needs to get done. They didn't realize what's all involved, and that can ultimately lead to cash flow crunch, revenue dips. As a business owner, that's stressful. At the least, it can be, very debilitating, beyond that. Now think about that in the business. Now I want you to think about this. How does this affect your physical body? We're talking about business, but these are things that cascade across. We get adrenal fatigue, perhaps, maybe late nights. We're fixating about avoidable mistakes that could have been addressed. Going it over and over in our brain. We can't sleep. We're restless. We get ulcers. We get stress in our back or our body. Um, and that will then cascade into perhaps trying to overcompensate, do more, do more. And then we have tension with our team or our loved ones because we can't be fully present. We can't transition. And that does more damage. And you think about how that echoes. Um, for those of you that like neuroscience, like I'm a big neuroscience nerd. I love learning about this, but there's uh, you know these these elements in our body and the way our brain works, where we have different hormones and releases, and we have cortisol, which is a stress hormone. We have uh, you know where we want some dopamine to help offset that. There's these different things that are going on. There's actually processes in our brain and our body in which react to these situations. And then ultimately, we have a bigger question, perhaps, that we may ask us, why am I doing all this? What's my motivation? What's the bigger picture here? What I call my spiritual or my being domain. So this is painful. This is a big deal when we're off in our execution, how we're showing up day in and day out. Now, this again mentioned earlier in the beginning of this podcast affects other domains. We talked about our alignment, our relationships, communication, all of those things. And we're going to be getting to capacity in our next episode. So, what is our capacity to build on our execution today? And why does execution break down? What is it? What leads to this breakdown? Well, there's a couple areas I'm going to unpack for you here. Now, I always say on the podcast, or I often remind you that I can't solve all these things on the podcast, but this hopefully open you the door, open your mind to consider these things so that you can move into a more healthy place and that you can be proactive and hopefully do that for the rest of your team and the folks that are around you. But one of these things I want to start with here is our vision is vague or perhaps overwhelming you. What is your vision? What is your desired outcome? What does that look like? This is the big picture. And perhaps it's either, again, fuzzy or overwhelming because you've got so much or all things kind of equal. You might have too many things out there. Like, and so I often see a breakdown of clear responsibilities. What is your key result area? Or again, what's your priorities? Are you clear on your priorities? Because again, all things being equal, if you haven't explained that, you're going to go to your natural areas of strength and the things that you're not as strong at. You're going to likely step away from those things, and that could be a problem. Are you clear on your timelines? How much time is it gonna take? You may give a timeline, but you're like, "I don't know how to do it within that time frame," or, "I didn't anticipate that it was gonna take this." You understand the multiple steps. You're like, "Oh, I could do this." This is one I've seen many times where, let's just say a report needs to be done, and it's due to the client on Friday, 5 o'clock. Okay, that sounds good. And I'm gonna, like, finish my report. I was assigned my report, I'm gonna finish the report, and I'm ready to turn it in at 4 something on Friday. Well, did you consider editing, you, graphics, the other elements? You're just like, "Well, I did my part. Mine's done. I give it in." Like, you don't think of all the cascading challenges there that disables you. Have you thought about redundancy? Have you had a thought about other people that are in the process that need to be a part of this? The follow-up loop is broken and we don't know how to get back. Where does this go? Or this person's on vacation, or how are we planning for this? This is challenging. And again, like I said, that coupled with perhaps too many priorities means there's no real progress being made. And at the end of the day, everybody's frustrated. You're frustrated, your team's frustrated, your clients are frustrated because they're not seeing the results, the desired results, I should say. There's results, there's consequences, this is a reality, but it's not the one that we desire. And so we need to be more intentional about creating that. Now, how do we do that? How do we break that down and fix it? Um, on this short podcast, I want to give you some actionable items that you can always leave and start to apply. We go much deeper in all the other resources I have as part of the Steward Your Business and the programs, both with companies and individuals. There is a place for you, and I provide additional resources through some of the programs and channels or spaces that we've created. But I'm going to give you a few here that you can take and apply today uh, so that you can start to develop and fix the flow. Have you ever had a hose where it's kinked and the water's not coming through, and you gotta fix that, and all of a sudden it's like, oh my goodness, the flow is coming through. We're actually getting things done. We're actually seeing progress being made. Look for systems that drive execution. We need to always pair people and process. When you pair those things together, you can be unstoppable, but you need both. It's understanding that. I just did a disc assessment today, and for those of you who haven't done a disc assessment, let me know, and I've got other tools and resources. Happy to share them with you. But that assessment identifies people that are really good, particular along with the 5 voices of how people developing processes and systems, and people that are developing relational harmony and connection. I love looking at these different facets because that'll give me a clue into how to show up better for myself and working with those on my team. So, a good question is who, what, and by when. This is the core execution framework. You may have heard this, maybe you haven't, but who am I going to delegate to? Who is responsible for this? What does it look like to get this thing done? And then by when does it need to be done? Oftentimes, one of those things gets dropped. Often, who's not too hard. I say, I know who I'm going to have how to do this, but what does it look like for them to actually get this done? What's the time involved, right? And by when does this need to be done? Oftentimes, we don't give enough information for somebody to be successful in an assignment. We can look at weekly rhythm reviews or scoreboards or however you want to track it digitally. Nowadays, a lot of us don't come into the same office, so we're not going to. Even if there was an office, we not see a whiteboard. But I would say find a way that it can be clear that you can look at. Here's where we're at, and this is where we want to go. The better we get at that, and this doesn't mean you have to have a meeting in person or even a meeting online, but you do need to make sure you're communicating information to your team, where to look, where are we in this process. The more that we can be transparent about that, the better. We don't want to be hiding information behind walls and not being clear on the commitment. This is a big one. Think about I've seen this happen, for example, in there's a big marketing effort. We want to get this thing going, a proposal. We want to get a presentation out. We want to get perhaps going to a trade show or a conference. And then we're like, oh, but by the way, we also have this big project that we got to execute on as far as getting certain people in the field and other elements. And so we didn't talk with each other again. And so I mentioned earlier why it breaks down is there's too many priorities. So we can then need to come together and perhaps meet and review those priorities and then shift and horse trade, if you will, and saying, you know what, this is more important. We need to move this around. And I found when you do that intentionally, everybody actually does much better. And there's less hurt feelings, there's less defensiveness, and we actually can again open the flow a bit more. But this is a constant back and forth where there's some constriction and then we can open things back up. That's why I work with clients and we start to unpack and we look at those things in an objective way instead of, you know, perhaps territorial or we're looking and trying to defend ourselves. Freedom does come from structure and not just spontaneity. As one who's uh, struggles at that at times with my ADHD and other things. I have my full focus planner. I recognize that I need to have that structure. I work well with others that help me and help me be more successful. So don't shy away from that. I would say encourage you, particularly for those that are in the guardian voices. If you remember that, and if you missed an episode, go back and hear on the guardian voices. But those are all about due diligence. They're making sure that the systems and the processes are set up. They do a really good job at that. And then you pair that up with connectors or nurturers. Create is also really good about coming up with ideas and ways to improve things. Then they need somebody to help implement it. So it's important that we fuse these different voices together that might be opposed to each other if we don't appreciate what each brings in order to help fix the flow here. Um, you know, James Clear likes to say you'll fail or fall, I should say, to the level of your systems. But where are we at? So those system champions out there, those folks that like to break the steps down, empower them, get them on your team, help them break it down for you. Um, you know, Accountability is not about control, but it's really about love and action. That's another one of my mentors, if you will, Simon Sinek says this. And so we want to look at how we can include and help each other be accountable and create the desired consequences or outcome so that we all win. And we want to make sure that we are seeing this bigger picture so that we can all succeed, knowing that we're part of something bigger than ourselves as we develop this muscle of discipline and focus, we will all be better in the long run. And so, as I'm getting to the end of the episode this week, I want you to look at and think about where's your team using activity for progress? Are all the things they're doing really, really making a difference, or is it just a lot of noise? Honestly, we need to be brave and be able to talk with each other and say, you know what, that maybe isn't as important as we thought. We need to shift priorities. We need to focus. We need to help our team members over here. Um, One thing that I offer is a self-assessment and to look at how your habits are showing up for you. These can be atomic, as Brendan Bashar would say. There's atomic habits and how we can really blow up our influence, make a quantum leap in how we're impacting others. And so I'm going to offer on this particular podcast a complimentary, free, however you want to say it, 20-minute execution review for you, an individual, or your team, so we can take a quick dive into where you're at. Let's just jump in the pool. Let's look at where you're at, and we'll get a sense of things, and then we can start to back up and say, "Hey, you know what? This might be an area where we want to adjust or tweak." And sometimes it doesn't require a wide swing, but it does require some adjustment to the hinges, if you will. Open that door because the door may be off a little bit or needs some, you know, WD-40 in there, help move it easier. That's where I come in as your guide, as your advocate, your encourager. That's what I'm about at Steward Your Business, and that's what I bring through my years of experience. Uh, we're going to dive into capacity in our next episode, which is this other piece of the leadership puzzle. It's what keeps leaders from burning out, good teams from breaking down. So I invite you to come back for that episode on the next episode of the Intelligent Human Leadership Podcast. I invite you to share this podcast. Uh, Tell me what you enjoyed, what you learned. Of course, subscribe and follow along, whatever platform that is for you. We're on all of them. Um, but all that I know of YouTube, Spotify, Amazon, Apple, all of these and more. I appreciate you. I'm thankful for you to be a part of this journey. Know that you are important. Know that this is this is a journey and that you don't have to go alone. And then you have somebody here, David Carr, Steward Your Business, that is rooting for you and looks forward to having you come back and join me again in the next episode of the podcast. Thanks all for listening. Be well and take care. Bye now.